Welcome, everyone. I'm Amy Seeley, president of Seeley Test Pros and Leap, helping students to succeed in all kinds of tests from 8th grade to grad school throughout Ohio.
And I'm Mike Bergen, president of Chariot Learning, helping students with tests, school, and life based out of Rochester, New York.
Between the two of us today, we have over 60 years of experience at the highest levels of the test preparation and supplemental education industries.
We both love to talk and learn about the latest issues in education, testing, and admissions. So let's get down to tests and the rest. The fascinating topic we want to explore today is how parents can support and not derail the college process. But first, let's meet our special guest, Lisa Hillhouse.
Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Hillhouse is an independent educational consultant and the founder of Hillhouse College and Career Advising based in Atlanta. Prior to launching her practice, Lisa retired from the Air Force after 26 years of active duty and reserve service. Lisa began her admissions journey with a special assignment to Air Force ROTC at the University of California, Berkeley. She loved educating and mentoring young leaders and continued that work at the U.S. Air Force Academy as a deputy liaison officer, director, and admissions liaison officer. Lisa has a bachelor's degree in politics from Assumption University, a master's degree in human relations from the University of Oklahoma, and a college and career planning graduate certificate from the University of California, Berkeley. Lisa is nationally recognized for expertise in the specialty of guiding and supporting students through the complex process of becoming commissioned officers. Welcome.
Thank you, Amy and Mike. It is so nice to be back with you.
It is so nice, Lisa, to have you back with us. It has been a while. Listen to this. You were first on the podcast back in episode 104 to discuss applying to military academies. Then in 184 for demonstrating leadership in college applications.
Right.
Then we featured you in an IEC profile in episode 315. And now we're more than 300 episodes later.
It's been a hot minute.
Exactly.
Well, catch us up. How have you been?
Really well, thank you. This is my 11th year in my practice and my 31st year in college admissions. So it's been a great journey. Since I last saw you, I'd probably say I've been doing a lot of traveling. Love that. I started playing golf, which is a really good physical, mental, emotional challenge to learn that. And then this year, I've been doing some guests on some podcasts, but I'm also getting ready to launch a blog and do some of my own hosted webinars. So doing a little bit more education and outreach, to the general public. So it's been a busy couple years.
Yeah. And certainly in that time, the admissions landscape has certainly become different, right? Like we're all seeing this evolution in the time that we've known each other within the industry that we find ourselves, right?
Definitely. It feels like the amount of change in the last few years, post-COVID, but especially this current year has been probably, what we saw in the 10 years previous, the amount of changes. So we're just all keeping the ship afloat, right? Rolling with the punches.
And not to mention, we've all shepherded our own kids through the
Right.
college admissions process over the last few years, right? I mean, so which obviously does give even a different dynamic to the conversation we're about to have, because we obviously are parents who've underwent this process.
It is so true. I mean, I think you could be a great counselor without having children, but having your own Eagle Scout or varsity athlete or, child that, struggled with this or excelled in that, that makes you such a better counselor. So my youngest is about to graduate from Georgia Tech. So like officially empty nesting. So that's exciting too. But yes, you learn so much through them, more than you could learn in school for sure.
I find it funny that we're going to talk about what parents can do. And despite 30 years in this space, I still wasn't completely prepared when it came to my own kids.
Right.
Is that just me?
Definitely. Too, I worked with each of my three kids, and so there are pluses and minuses to that. Some of them really wanted the help, some did not. And I did have the older two meet with like a trusted friend and say, hey, let's talk about your list and your essay. And they literally gave the exact same advice I did. And my kids both came back like, well, Susan said this, so-and-so said that. And it's just like when I work with kids where I tell them something similar to their parent or different, but when it's similar, it's like the parent never told them, right? Like they
Hmm.
just stopped listening.
You gain
So
street cred by referring, by having an outside resource, right? Which is helpful,
that's
I
a great
think.
word for it.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's great if you could bring someone in. And even if you're not hiring someone, a school counselor, a friend, an older cousin, somebody they're going to listen to really helps. So it's tough. I have a lot of empathy for parents. Like I want to preserve that relationship they have with their kids.
So let's begin this conversation from the premise that the parent is allowed to even talk about the college process with students, understanding there is definitely a segment of the population of teens that will not hear it, no matter how well informed their parents are.
Right.
So, parents, guardians, and, like any adult that's helping students through this process, but definitely when we're talking about the home team.
Hmm.
Let's start at the beginning with the initial conversations about the college search process, what can be expected, what is permissible within very realistic restrictions.
Right.
What are some non-negotiable terms that parents and caretakers should sit down with their teens and lay out at the beginning of the college process?
Sure. The biggest one where I would spend the most time would be the financial repercussions of going to college. There are other things about like distance, are you going in state versus out of state? What kind of majors do you want to explore? But I'd say the biggest is going to be financial because college next to your home, if you're a homeowner, is going to be the biggest financial investment your family's going to make, right? And so we know that college has dramatically increased in costs, like 4 to 7% for tuition, and some cases room and board per year. And so I remember when I first started, a family said our budget is 250,000 for all 4 years of college. And I thought, great, I can send him anywhere. And there were a few schools. That was 11 years ago,
Mhm.
and now we have schools approaching 100,000 or just hitting that per year. And so parents really need to say, educate themselves on what's financial aid and will we be eligible? Because with the FAFSA changing, families that used to get that discount with multiple kids in school aren't. They need to look at, is it a CSS profile school? So what's the methodology for aid? What is merit aid and how important is it? So I like to have a meeting with parents right off the bat and I ask them in their survey, what's your budget annually or for 4 years? Are you paying for grad school if that's an option? How important is financial aid and merit aid? And keep that in mind throughout that whole process and list building and applications. And we circle back before applications again, like, is this a doable list for you?
And I do feel like, Mike, with all the conversations that we have about college, finances, it tends to be the one thing that very often that part of the conversation doesn't happen until the very end, right? Like that is very typical.
And then there's that old anecdote, right? Would you bring a teen to
Car dealership. Yeah.
a car dealership and just say, pick out whatever car you like? Of course,
Or
we
test drive the
gravitate.
Ferrari, right? When you know you're never going to buy a Ferrari, right?
And that's it. Like for every other purchase,
Mhm.
there is a budget.
Right.
And for some reason, families, especially teens, without this first conversation, enter the process thinking that the sky's the limit, like unlimited budget. What's your dream?
Mhm.
And that's not the reality for a lot
But
of people.
following along that car purchase metaphor, I just recently got a new car. They don't put the sticker price on the car, right? We don't necessarily know what is the final bottom line. And so I think that's what allows or creates this opportunity for us, for parents to exist in this non-financial part of the process is
Exactly.
because you hear stories, right? Anecdotally, we know this is what happens. Oh,
Mhm.
so and so is going to school X. They're only paying this much money. And I think what parents don't understand is like it isn't all apples and apples.
Right.
It's apples and oranges because of these documents and these resources that
Right.
nobody talks about how much they make. So when it comes back to filling out the forms, we're not all equal when we're applying and
Oh
looking at getting
no.
aid.
Oh no. And you can even do like the net press calculator for every school, right? And that's important. And you can do like the FAFSA, you know, estimator tool. But when I did it for my daughter, the number that came back, I was like, wow, this is really doable. And then when I filed the FAFSA, it was double that. I'm like, that's
Right.
not
I don't
doable.
always trust that. I think another set of terms that should be set out at the beginning would be parents letting their teens know what work they expect of them at certain milestones, meaning if you don't want us to bring in support for helping you with any part of this, these are the things you have to have figured out at different points. And that goes double for the financial piece because a lot of kids would be like, okay, no, I'll figure this out and I'll get scholarships and I'll do all the work. But it's like we see Amy with the students whose parents bought them the best self-directed test prep resources possible.
Yes.
And they gathered dust until the 11th hour. And the parents are like, well, now we have to do something.
Right.
The fear set in.
And Lisa, I bet you get those calls as well.
I do. This is the time of year, junior year is ending, and parents are starting to panic and look for that help. It is really important. I had a parent once that I asked the budget, they wouldn't give me a budget, and as we talked, I was like, "Are you sure you're comfortable with this list?" And long story short, the student got into Northeastern, which was their dream. It was cheaper back in the day, and the dad called me and said, "You need to tell Smith he can't go to Northeastern." And I was like, that is not my job. This
Right.
is why I asked you repeatedly at different points in the process, are you comfortable with that cost? And I said, I'm happy to sit down with the two of you, figure out a plan of what you can do to make it more doable. And we did that, and he did wind up going, but that's kind of not a line that I should cross. Like parents need to say it. And with our own kids, we did an Excel sheet and we're like, what's the tuition at the University of Denver? What's the room and board? What's that cost of attendance? Now, here's your budget and what's the difference? And if you don't get scholarships in that range, is it doable? So we said, it's okay to have one or two schools that are above that budget that give merit aid. But if you went to this school, you would have money left over, right? And where are you going to build that list? And so I still use that with my families.
That makes a lot of sense. Lisa, have you ever had parents come to you with restrictions like geography? The student is an East Coaster who wants to study out on the West Coast, and the parents are like, that's not going to happen. But
Right.
maybe they didn't have that conversation until a little late in the game.
Definitely. So sometimes it's about majors, and that could be a cultural thing, like your parents did this, or, in our culture, most people are focusing on STEM,
Right.
things
You're
like
not going
that.
to college to study basket weaving. That's
Yes, you're not going to do musical theater, you're only doing biology. Sometimes parents have preconceived notions about schools, or maybe there's like reputations such as Chico State's a party school, you can't go there.
I can
Now,
attest to that.
I have such successful parents who went there, studied marketing, our C-suite execs, right? Or a parent will say, you can't go to this school because there's not enough smart kids there. Like we know that's a fallacy. There are smart kids
Or the
everywhere.
reputation. You can't go to school because the reputation isn't
Yes,
even
we're a Michigan family, you can't go to Michigan
right.
State. And sometimes they're taking things off the table.
And unfortunately, they may be using their knowledge from when
Mhm.
they were applying to colleges, right?
Yes.
The good news for some colleges is they've transformed since, like I'll give my own state, which is the Ohio State University. When
Right.
I talked to a peer that graduated from OSU, my opinion of their probably academics is low. But if you're telling
Uh,
me it's a student that's there now, I'm like, oh
Right.
wow.
It's an impressive school. It's
Or
hard to
even
get
like
into.
you mentioned Northeastern, right?
Mhm.
Northeastern, we all know what we bore witness to with Northeastern in terms of its transformation over the last few years. So,
It used to be a commuter school. Anyone could get in 30 years ago.
right.
So
So
different. Right.
parents have to be careful using their own prior knowledge because no kid even wants to hear what their prior knowledge was anyway, right?
Oh yeah. And sometimes parents are like, you really should go to my alma mater, or maybe they're like, all your sisters went to South Carolina, you should go too. So it's like thinking who's the student, what's the best fit for them. And geography is important. Like there's always the flyover states, right? Kids don't
Mhm.
necessarily want to go to certain parts of the country, but that's often where there's amazing opportunities like financially, research, academic programs, or maybe the parents don't want them to go out of state and the kids are like, how far away can I go? So
Mhm.
it's bridge building between them too. But those are all things that could kind of hinder that process, saying I absolutely can't go to that state because I don't like the politics.
Mhm.
college towns, can be different politically from states too. So keeping an open mind for everybody is what I do. They don't always listen, but I do try.
Are there any other things you want to add about how parents can support the exploration phase of the college search process?
Sure. So, one thing that I think is really important is doing your research on schools. And that's not just sitting down for an hour and going to the school website. So, having parents and students go to a wide variety of sites, ones that are both objective and subjective. Um, Also, opening those emails and exploring like what's the living learning community? What are the career outcomes? I really like people to visit colleges, and I realize everyone doesn't have the time and money to do it, but like waiting until the very end, like spring break of senior year, is not the time to visit because you may think, I love RIT on paper. And then I get there and I'm like, oh, it just doesn't feel right. But I already got in and it's on my short list.
Or you put all that time into the application process for that one
Time and money,
school.
maybe you interviewed, right?
Right,
Things like
right.
that. And so I want kids to plan those trips too, because that's building their life skills, like how will I travel? And then when you go on the visit, parents can help by like, looking at what they set up, but then maybe going on separate tours and like having some distance so kids can open up or talk to the rep, because parents are going to hear something different than
Yeah,
the
I was going to
student.
say sometimes parents can help by keeping their mouths shut. At least that's what my daughter told
Oh
me.
my God. Every time I open my mouth, my daughter would cringe. She's like, oh God, don't ask anything. Like she was embarrassed by me asking any questions, but like that's why we're here, right?
Right.
So
So
my
the idea of
youngest.
separate tours is actually a great idea, Lisa.
Right. And then go to a coffee shop, go to a dining hall, talk to people online, observe what's going on. When I went with my youngest to LSU, she's like, you have two questions the whole day. Make them count. And
Make
so I
them
was like,
count,
oh, how
Lisa.
can I combine them all? Because kids are mortified by their parents, right?
Yes.
Even a profession in the field. And so letting them see it. And then also after the visit, giving them space. Like hopefully they took some notes, took some pictures. And then, a couple days later, a thing I really like for parents to do is say, we're going to have a touch point each week, especially as we get into senior year and lots of things are happening. But we won't talk about college unless you bring it up. But maybe Sundays at 4 o'clock, we're going to discuss, do you need my credit card to pay for your ACT registration or these apps? Or, did you need me to proof the application or something like that? And so they're not a captive in the car with you and
Well,
you're,
I like that. You're
drilling down on
giving
them.
you're giving them suggestions of things that could be good activities, but you're also letting them set some boundaries, right? Like they're saying, here's what I will want to talk to you about, or here's what I won't, or here's how we can plan for,
Mhm.
a more effective process where we can work together, but when they choose, or how they choose.
And sometimes like maybe one parent's the worrier and the other parent's the encourager. And so sometimes just one parent stepping back and being like, talk with your dad or talk with your mom. And, then the parent talk to the other parent, right? And so sometimes kids just want to be really independent, but people can also be so hands off that they don't know what's going on, right? And
Mhm.
now it's December, no apps have gone in, they haven't done the FAFSA, they don't have a list. So there's that supportive and encouraging, but generally, unless you have another person like handling it with them, definitely checking in and be like, okay, do we have a list? It's the summer junior year.
I will share anecdotally my oldest daughter. So, of her college list, there was one school that we said we would not pay for the application fee, and we made her pay. And there's a reason for that. But in any case, she did. And there was a scholarship opportunity, which we took her to, and she got a full ride to that school.
Wow.
So then it came down to, and it was pretty early on, right?
Right.
In the process. And we were like, oh, wait a second. We actually really need to consider the school because we were like, she could go for free. And so it is kind of interesting, but she took the initiative. What's interesting about that is she took all the initiative. For that. And then at the
Right.
end, they were like, well, this is silly. She obviously, and she ended up going there and thrived. And so,
I
but it's
love
so funny
that.
that situation that like we
Mhm.
were the ones derailing something she wanted to do. There was a boyfriend there, by the way. Her boyfriend was older, so there was a reason why we were trying to not support that. But then she created a deal that we couldn't refuse.
Right. Yes. we don't want to send kids where like they have a boyfriend or girlfriend
Right,
because
right.
that
As
typically
parents,
doesn't
we
work
don't,
out.
right? But
Unless, right, that was already the school that they wanted to go to anyway. That is so great.
mhm, yeah, it's my
Yeah,
funny
I
parent
did.
story.
I did have a parent who the child wanted to do psychology and biology or neuroscience, but also loved musical theater. And the parents like, they cannot apply for musical theater. So finally, the parent was like one school for musical theater, and it was a huge reach, and they didn't get into it. But that was like the compromise. Like, if that's your dream school and major, do that. But all the other schools need to have, a more practical major. Mhm.
Lisa, we know that the college admissions process is a little bit stressful for everyone
Just a bit.
involved. It's stressful for applicants and their families and their counselors and supporters. And then later it becomes stressful for colleges. We're not here to talk about that. We're talking about the process from beginning to end. There will be points of pressure,
Right.
there will be periods of panic. How can parents keep everything cool for themselves and then through themselves
Mhm.
model grace for their teens?
So that grace is so important. And I tell kids, give your parents grace. They're seeing their child go off in the world, right? Part of their role, they've put themselves out of a job, right? I tell kids, give yourself grace. Like you getting into a school or not is not a reflection of your value or your worth. Um, we talked about trying to limit the times that you talk about college, right? Knowing that every student's going to be on their own journey. I think having some things like we know we need to file for financial aid in the fall. We know we need to have deadlines done by this, applications in, like celebrating those wins. So for me, I want my students done with that heavy lifting by the Monday of Thanksgiving week. And I tell them, I want you to go into the Thanksgiving holiday with your family and be like, check back with me in April when I make my final decision. All my apps are in. I don't want to talk about college. I'm done with that process. So, setting little rituals and little timelines. But I also think like that senior year, that's the last year most kids are going to live in your house, right? Maybe like when my oldest went off to college, they didn't come home in the summers. They
Yeah.
were working and interning and things like that. And so it's like saying, let's make this year special. Like, let's do a trip. Let's have time that we spend doing something together. I think too, we think about sometimes parents let the prestige of going to college or college a student gets into become part of their identity. And it's not like we are applying to Yale, it's your daughter is
Right. The
applying to
Good
we.
point,
Yale.
We all
right?
know about the we pronoun in the
The
process,
we
right?
pronoun. And so it's also saying, there's 4,000 traditional four-year colleges. And I tell parents and kids up front, applying to college and picking a college is like dating. There's not just one person for you in this
Right.
whole big world. There are many places you could be happy. And sometimes life changes and you change directions and you need to change a school, because of your major or the campus culture. But, I don't want you to have to change schools. Several students do. But like, if this decision isn't the right one, we can do a reset. It's okay. And the
Right.
world's not going to end because you didn't get into your dream school or a prestigious school. So it's kind of giving yourselves grace, but also knowing like it's not, a zero-sum game.
Any advice you can give just about how a parent might be able to reassure students when they
Mhm.
reach the very end, when they're with that final outcome?
Right. So if are you talking about when they're picking the school and I
Yeah,
have
like
that
let's
first
say we're
final
at April 1, right? And
Yes.
like, because at that point that's hard. It's the first time a student might be making
Right.
this decision that's going to define their first 4 years, but then launch them into their like adulthood.
Exactly. So there's this John Lennon quote, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not the end. I think that's great for all areas of life. But, I say, and I like to do like a wrap up meeting or a decision meeting with the family if they don't have that decision. But, we go through different things like what was your college criteria? Now, how does that match, Penn State or Austin or whoever? It's also like picture yourself sitting there. Like, did you feel like that was your people when you visited, when you've talked to alumni? I think it's going with your gut and trusting, but also going back to the finances when we talked about that. So I recently had a student choosing between South Carolina as an out-of-state student and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo as an in-student state. And the student loved South Carolina. And they liked Cal Poly, but it was going to be a $20,000 a year difference,
Oh,
which was
wow.
going to be
Yeah.
the student responsibility. And I was like, I can give you ideas of how to manage that, but is it $20,000 a year better?
Huh.
And ultimately, the student's like, it's not 20,000 a year better. He's
Hmm.
like, I love that school. If you had said it's $20,000 over 4 years, that would be a very different story. But like, I'm never trying to saddle kids with debt and make it stressful paying for it. And, he has friends in Cal Poly and he knows he wants to stay in California and he knows it's a great school for his major. So it's like letting them come to that realization. Like, I went and visited and then I weighed the options and then I talked it over with my family. I met kids there. I met kids I knew again, and had that conversation, and trusting in that process. And so I think too, like the parents kind of stepping back, like we know where we think he should go, but we're not going to say it. And those parents were really great with that. They were like, we want them to come to their own conclusion. So, yes, grace, know that it's going to work out. And sometimes, as you know, kids go to schools and maybe it wasn't their first choice. And then they realize I'm in the perfectly best place for me, and there's that book where you go is not who you will
Yeah.
be, and I'm a big believer in that. It's like what you do at college, the people you make connections with, the internships, the activities, that's what determines your outcome. It's not because you went to a top 10 business school. Maybe it's a top 50 business school, but you're still going to succeed. It's going to be okay.
That is a great note of hope to end on, Lisa. We could speak with you all day. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much.
It has been a pleasure. Thanks so much for this conversation.
If listeners would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. So go to my website, hillhousecollegeadvising.com, and there's information on there, resources, services, ways to get in touch with me and schedule a free meeting too.
Awesome. We hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as we did. Be sure to join us for another fascinating topic and guest on the next Tests and the Rest.
Did you enjoy this episode as much as we did? Find expanded links and more for this and all of our episodes at our show page at testsandtherest.com. While you're there, be sure to explore everything the larger TestBright site has to offer, including real, expert, unbiased answers to the toughest admissions testing questions. Of course, we'd love for you to rate, review, and subscribe to Test and the Rest on your favorite podcast platform. If there's a topic or guest you'd like us to feature, just let us know and spread the word.